Hello, Sparkles! We are back at it again today with more hotel stories. Now, this one is just going to be a run through, and I tried to organize it as best I can. I'm going to see how far it goes though. So this is multiple locations, and some of them are going to be pretty short. So let's see how far we go. And first we're going to start with the west location. I'm going to start off with this one. And I only have like 2 stories with this one, because that's just kind of how it went. The thing I remember most honestly about these hotel locations is honestly their layout. Because, and for me, it's just surprising how they're all under the same name, but they're all shaped differently. I don't know why, but that was just a thing for me for some reason. And this west location it was just huge. It was ginormous. And when I was driving by there, I think it was huge because it was next to a highway. It was also off of like another main street. Actually, no, it was off by 2 main highways now that I think about it. A major one, and then there was another one off on the side. And even then, it was next to a bunch of like restaurants and stuff. So I think that's why it was so huge. But anyway, I will say that I'm going to give a warning for death. A trigger warning for death, baby, child, however you want to describe it. And what happened in this one is I had a family member that worked as a manager, and this was basically their story. They hired an employee. I can't remember if they did they did overnight laundry. That's what it was. They did overnight laundry, and they were having trouble with that employee. And I would work at that location again as like front desk, so I was familiar with that employee. And they called off because their partner was giving birth. And for some reason, they had messaged my family member and said, this was my child, or they said this was my son. And they sent her a picture of, I don't even know what it's called, like a fetus or the stillborn child. I don't know why they did that. I don't know if they were trying not to get in trouble for like calling off. I don't know what the excuse was. I don't know what that story was. The family member just left it alone. They didn't respond. I don't know if they sent it to HR. They should have. They didn't, but yeah. There's other things that happened at the hotel, but that was like the biggest one that I remember because it was, you can already tell that it was the most memorable thing that happened. Only small other things that happened there were that we were having trouble keeping the rooms cleaned because we were just running out of housekeepers. So I would have guests come in and demand that I clean their room. They were demanding that I clean their room. Like, if you're getting upset that your room isn't clean. Oh, and sorry. You would get housekeeping once a week if you were living there, and they would demand that I go in and clean their room. Like, if you're upset that your room isn't clean, then who do you think is going to get upset that I'm not at the front desk checking them in and whatnot? I'm not going to clean your room. There are those jobs that want you to be a team player. Like, no, I have a job and I'm going to do my job, and I'm going to do it well. But I'm not going to do someone else's job, because then I'm not going to be able to do my job. Like, what is that? Anyway. Yeah, and then one fun thing I do remember is that there was this big fluffy dog. And I remember if I wish I could have. If I put my hand in that dog, my hand would have disappeared into fluff, into a cloud. That would have been nice. But unfortunately, that's all I really remember from the west location. I do remember working there on and off. I don't remember much else though besides the way it looked. There was like a room in the back office. This building was so huge. Normally the laundry area would be right behind the front desk. But this one was so big, the laundry room was separate. You'd have to actually walk quite a bit away and around the corner to get to the laundry room where staff would actually do the laundry for like sheets and stuff. That's all, unfortunately, how I remember getting there. It was that big, at least for me. The next location we're going to talk about is Oak Tree, the Oak Tree location. And the thing I remember about that one is that it was another big location. It actually had a big sit-in area that you could walk into, and it was a lounge area. You could actually walk into. It was kind of closed off. It was actually tucked into a corner in front of the front desk. There was rarely anything like that in the locations that I worked at. Rarely. I think there was only 2, and this was one of them. And there was actually a TV there. It was a nice sit-in area. There were couches, and they were actually like good couches, if you ask me. But yeah, it was actually pretty nice. We'd have some people going on and off, but not really, which I don't know why you wouldn't. Probably because they had rooms. And yeah, they probably wanted their own private areas too, but this would actually encourage me to go out. Anyway, the thing I remember is that family member that worked in the West area, they also worked in the Oak Tree area when they switched locations. They would ask me to actually work at that Oak Tree area more often than not. And they would pay me under the table. But they would be like, "Hey, here's your money." And I'm like, "Hey, this isn't like my pay rate. Why aren't you paying me in full?" And they're like, "I'm taking away the taxes. I'm not paying you because of taxes. I'm taking that out." And I'm like, that doesn't make sense. I pay taxes. Can anyone explain that to me? They didn't pay me my full rate, and their reason was because they were paying taxes. Wouldn't I pay taxes if I reported that? Or I don't know, that didn't make sense to me. But they would do that. That's the reason they didn't pay me my full rate per hour. They were paying taxes, but wouldn't I pay the taxes? I don't know. But the other thing that I remember is there was a woman who had passed away, and their family had come to the hotel, actually. Apparently. Unfortunately, I wasn't familiar with the family, and apparently they came to the hotel, and our policy is that you have to pay everything up front. I just can't like have you come in and check in and say that you'll pay later. You have to pay everything up front, cash, credit card, all this and that. And they wanted to check in with me, but they said that they would pay later. And at that time, I was a strict person who said, "No, I can't. You have to pay everything up front." And they said, "Don't you know who we are? Don't you know what we're doing, what we're fighting for, and things like that?" Unfortunately, I did not. I did not know who they were. And if you're not familiar, the family that, if I remember correctly, the woman that they were talking about was, if I don't say this correctly, I really do apologize. Sandra Bland, the 28-year-old black woman who was found hanged in a Texas jail cell 3 days after she was arrested, I believe. And her family was staying at our hotel, and they were like protesting and doing all this stuff. And they wanted to check in and pay later. And by later, I mean like once they checked out. Hotels do that. You can check in and pay as you leave. Unfortunately, at the location that I worked at, you check in and you pay. And I said that I couldn't do that. And then a gentleman behind me says, "No, I know who you are. I'll check you in." You know, I'm fine with that. If you want to put it under your name, go ahead. But if you remember, if from the other podcasts, I've been reprimanded for trying to help the hotel, for trying to clean the rooms, for trying to help make maintenance tickets so guests won't complain, for doing a lot of stuff, and even later on for ridiculous things. I'm not going to get in trouble for letting someone check in and say that they'll pay later. And if someone else wants to do it, go ahead. If I could do things like that, especially for advocating for something like this that I believe in, if I could, I would. But I'm not going to get in trouble again. I'm not going to get in trouble again. And, you know, I'm glad that they could solve it, but it's just not something that at the time that I want to get in trouble for again. And speaking of which, there was another family that, this was when I had just walked in to the hotel, so I didn't have anything to do with this one. There was a child that came in and said, hey, can you remake my keys? Sure, I'll remake your keys. Normally the process for me is I check your room account to see, one, that you're actually in that room, and two, I try to check the reason why your keys might have deactivated. Do you owe money? Or maybe are you not on the count? Did something happen? Is there like a dispute in there or something? But, you know, this was a kid or whatever. It's something that's automatic for me too. I just usually put it up and whatnot. But when I looked at the account, this room owed thousands of dollars. They owed thousands of dollars. And they had been living there for, I don't even know for how long. Months, maybe? And when you live in a location for over 30 days, I don't remember if it was like 30, 60 days or anything like that, but once someone lives there, I believe 30 days or over, they're technically squatters and you can't kick them out, because at that point they've stayed there, even if they paid, if they paid 30 days and then they stop paying, and feel free to correct me, but this is as far as I remember or recall. But if they paid 30 days, or even if they haven't paid, if they stayed there for 30 days or longer, they're technically squatters, and then you can't kick them out at that point. Especially if they have their materials in there indicating that they stayed there, like bags, furniture, and things like that, then yeah, you can't kick them out. So they owed thousands. I don't know who checked them in. I don't know what happened with the difficulty in having them leave. But yeah, they had been there for a long time and owed thousands. And having a squatter leave is a extremely long process. It can be an extremely long process. So I did have to remake their keys and just give it back. Another thing that I remember, which I didn't write down, but I remember, is that there was a housekeeper that left their cart out at the front desk, and I had walked away to get something, and then I came back and there was a woman grabbing towels out of the housekeeper's cart, and I said, hey, you can't do that. And she said, no, the housekeeper said I could do it. I can't verify if that happened, so I just let her go. And then I went into the back and the housekeeper was there, and I said, hey, someone grabbed stuff off the cart. Did you say that they could do that? And they're like, no, I didn't. This stuff happens all the time. People just grab things. Like, the process is easy. Just bring your dirty towels and we will exchange it for new towels at the front desk. Why grab more towels so then you have more filth in your room? At least that's what I would think they do. Maybe they have more people and they need more towels. But then that leaves less for everybody else who's checking in. There are more people than you. But I don't know. There's at this point there's less empathy and sympathy in the world, so I don't know. But that's not going to stop me from being kind. I'll tell you that. That's not going to stop me from being kind and showing others kindness. So that is the oak tree location. Now we're going to talk about the egg glue. This is what I'm calling it, at least. The egg glue location. And the reason I'm calling it the egg glue location is because I quit working there in winter. I quit working there in winter, and I'm not sure why that's so significant to me, but there is other stuff that happened. I did like working there because it was really small, tight-knit. I can either go with small areas or big areas. I can go either way. But this one was a really tight-knit area. You were behind a front desk. There was like walls squishing you in, which honestly I didn't really mind. And in a small corner, there was a desk area where no one could see you, which I thought was really cool. And then if you went behind the front desk wall, there was the manager's room. If you go behind that wall, there was a bunch of pans and dishes and stuff. And if you went behind that wall, there was laundry. So everything was all in one spot, which is one of the reasons I really liked this hotel. Unfortunately, it was extremely far away from where I was staying at the time. But it was still pretty nice. But anyway, the one thing I do remember that really irritated me is I had packages to send out because I was selling stuff out at the time. And the mailman that day was just not having it. I put a package out to be delivered, and then the guy started yelling at me. He's like, the return address isn't the same. I'm not going to take this package. I'm like, I don't care. I'm just like, okay, whatever. At least mentally to me, I'm like, I really don't care. You're still supposed to take the package, but in reality, I just took the package back because I don't like arguing with people. For me, just go with the road less traveled by. Just don't argue. Just do whatever. So I took the package back, and I just was like, okay, I'll go to my own post office. Like, I give people the benefit of the doubt when I probably shouldn't. I said, okay, maybe I'm supposed to go to my own post office, but I don't know, because this one was actually way further out than where I am. Maybe this one was like 40 minutes out. Either way, he still had no right to be talking to me like that, but again, I'd rather just not argue it, not fight it. Maybe he was having an off day, or maybe he's just a butt face. I don't know. But again, I'm just going to do my own thing. The other story with that is, I think this manager was actually a sister of the Hill location I worked at. So that was interesting. To compare them both, though, I think they were pretty much the same, but I think the manager of this one was a bit more loose. She was a bit more laid back, I will say. The other thing is that I'm a workaholic. I don't like calling off. I don't like doing anything like that. I don't like taking a rest. I will work more hours even if I don't like it. Even if they were like, hey, do you want to leave early? I'm like, no, I'm good. But this was actually the first and only location where I actually called off. The first place I decided to not go. And it had nothing to do with the manager or anything like that. She was nice. She was fine. But it was actually because of the snow. I was terrified of driving. I don't like driving in the snow. I don't like not having control. And at that point in time, it was snowing pretty hard. The roads were really slippery. And as I said before, this location was far. This location was pretty far. And I had to make a lot of turns to get there. And that was the first time I actually called the manager, and I was like, nah, I'm not coming in. The roads are bad. And at least she didn't yell at me for it. So I'm pretty happy about that, at least. The other thing that makes this location memorable for me is that this is the first time I was talking to Scribs. It was significant for me, at least. So that memory stays for me at this location. Oh, and there was a restaurant right on the parking lot. It shared the parking lot with a restaurant. I think it was a Wendy's. It was interesting. Unfortunately, it was very far. I think at this point, yeah, I think we're going to go for it. There's only 2 other locations left, so this will make it the last hotel story. And yeah, these ones actually have quite a couple stories with them. And I'm going to call this one Yorkville. I don't know why, but Yorkville. It probably is actually a town. Anyway, the Yorkville location actually has quite a couple of stories with it. It was my second favorite location, probably because of the layout with it. It was near a bunch of restaurants. It was near a mall. Not that I ever went to it, but yeah, it was near quite a busy area. And one of my favorite things, and I'm kind of talking about the way the layout was, before they renovated, one of the hotel rooms was made like an apartment. It was made like an apartment, which I found interesting. They never finished making it though, so it was pretty empty and just filled with a bunch of random stuff. But I liked that it had that. Now, for an actual guest story though, this woman was limping towards me at the front desk. She was limping towards me and said, she said that she fell in the elevator. She said the floor was really wet and she fell in the elevator. I asked her if she was all right, and she said that she would be fine. I asked her if she wanted to, I don't know if I remember, I asked her if she wanted to make a report or anything, because I think this wasn't an incident that I hadn't done before or anything. But yeah, she said no, and then she left. And then I went to go mop up the elevator because it shouldn't be left too wet. And I put up a wet floor sign in the elevator. And then I walked back to the front desk. But then she came back, not like an hour later or anything. She came back within the next 5 minutes and said she did want to make a report. So I got the manager, let him do that business. But then she went back to the elevator to take pictures. She can't take pictures because the floor is dry and I put a wet floor sign. And of course she said, well, of course they're going to dry it up. Of course there's going to be a wet floor sign. Well, yeah, I'm not going to let another incident happen to you, or anyone else in the hotel. So I did feel really bad that it happened to her. I don't know why she wouldn't, make a report. I hope she had gotten better after that. She was holding her hip the whole time. Then again, I do have that own thing too, where I don't want to be a bother to people, so I would say no, but then I would second guess myself afterwards. The other thing that happened though is that, and I'm going to say this one outright, is that a black gentleman had come in and said that he was going to check in. He said he was supposed to have a free room. And I said, okay, that happens. Some people have a free room for the night, whether they have like a ticket for a free room or there were accommodations made by like the manager and stuff. So I looked up his reservation. There were no notes. There was an old reservation that he had, but it wasn't free. I had nothing. I had nothing for this guy. And he said that he talked to one of my coworkers. He actually was able to give me a full name. So I called that coworker because they weren't working at the time. And I tried to call to verify. That coworker said, nah, he lying to you. And I was like, okay, then that's all I got. So I went back to the gentleman and I said, I tried to call my coworker. And he said that he just doesn't have anything. I'm sorry, I don't have anything for you. And he said, nah, you're just being racist. You're just doing this because I'm black and da 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 da. And I'm just like, at the time, I didn't understand how important race was. And I'm like, the only one, I didn't say this, but I was like, the only one bringing up race is you. I'm so confused as to what's happening. In real life, I do look very pale. I do come off as, not come off, but I do look like I'm white. I'm not, I'm Mexican. And so I am a fellow minority. But to just assume that it's because of your race, I did go out of my way to check your reservation. I went out of my way to call my coworker, which I didn't have to do. But I did try to do everything that I could to find your reservation and like get a night or whatever. At the time, I don't know what else I could have done. If I tried to call the manager, especially the one at that time, they would have just said, call your coworker, or they're not working, so don't bother them. There's not much else I could have done. I can't give you a free night. I'm gonna get in trouble. I can't do anything. I've even had another guest say, when we had no rooms. So I'm going on to a different guest story. I've had another guest come up to me and I told them, hey, I'm sorry, I don't have any rooms for the night. We're completely sold out. And then they came up to me and said, well, if the president was here, which I think was Obama at the time, if the president was here, what would you tell them? We have no rooms for the night. Sorry. Then my answer does not change. We do not suddenly have room for the night. We do not have rooms at the back. We do. I would tell them the same thing. We don't have any rooms. Customer service is just, it doesn't change. Even in like working in the hotel business. Oh gosh. Oh man. That one though. But that's all I have for the Yorkville location. Oh man. I wish I could have done more for them. I'm sad that they thought that I could do more for either of them, but yeah. Anyway, the last one I have, which I feel like the name fits, and honestly, it's the best ones that I have, honestly. I'm gonna call this one the Downhill location, because honestly, that is what it was. The Downhill location. This one had probably the worst kinds of people there. I'm only going to mention 3 of them, and the last one honestly was the most interesting one, honestly. This one was a story that I've heard from other people. They hired 2 housekeepers. They were a married couple, so a man and a woman. And apparently every time that they were working together, they wanted to work together because they only had one car. They would keep arguing and fighting. They would go out to find each other and then start having an argument. They hired 2 housekeepers and they would just keep arguing and fighting. And of course, they're in the same hallway, so then that would bother the guests and they would keep causing a scene. So that was one thing that happened. The other thing that happened is there was a woman that wanted to be hired as a manager, and she was living on property. I liked her, but she was odd. She lived on property with her kids, and she was trying really hard to apply for a managing position that was constantly open at the location, at the Downhill location. And she would, when the manager was not at the property, constantly help the hotel keepers clean. She would come into the back and help us do laundry, fold the sheets, do the towels, do whatever, and she would talk to us. She would tell us on how good her kids are and how she helps them like sew their socks. She's such a good mom. She would be a good employee too. So much stuff that shouldn't have happened. Everyone was letting her do it. So I'm just like, am I supposed to let her do it? Like, I don't know. So I just pretty much went along with it. I mean, they were getting free labor, so I'm assuming that's why it was just going on. And the biggest story, honestly, is one that kind of bothered me to no end, honestly. And I mean in a way that it's always a story that will stick in the back of my mind. And that's because I trained this guy. I remember the day he first started, and I was training him. He was doing everything pretty well, and he was started at my location. He started in the lake location, and then when everything was said and done, he went to the Downhill location because they constantly needed help. I'm not sure how much time went by, but then I heard and saw on camera for multiple things. I heard that he got fired because he was helping rob the Downhill location First, he left the front desk to do something in the laundry room, and then a guy in a black mask jumped over the desk, opened the drawer, which is always supposed to be locked whenever you leave the front desk, and started grabbing money. I want to say that this is funny only because you're away from it, but it's also probably scary for the person that passed by. There was a person walking by watching the person rob the money during the footage. But yeah, the guy jumps over the front desk, opens the drawer, and starts stealing money. Where did the guy come from? And why did this happen consistently? And why was it always on his shift? It didn't happen every time, but it usually happened on his shift. So that was already like, ding, 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 something's going on. You're not doing it well, buddy. And then the other thing that happened that just sealed the deal for him was that he opened the drawer when he was working with another coworker and started switching the money out with fake money. Fake hundreds, fake 20s, things like that. That coworker came in and saw him doing that. And that coworker, who is male, said, "Hell no, not on my watch." Put him in a chokehold, threw him down, and I guess called the cops. And that is how he was taken down that day. I remember training that guy. He took it all very well in stride, but to hear that he did that money was being lost during his shift, and then to hear that he was caught red-handed, that it was a whole scheme, like, and I'm really disappointed. I'm really sad. Like, I don't know. I trained him, and to see that just happen, like, was I being fooled? Did something happen? Did something change? Did I do something wrong? I know it's not my fault. I know that it's not on me. I know there's something that I could have done, but you still just kind of wonder sometimes. But those are all the stories of the hotels that I've worked at, that I've been to. I'll probably remember more, but honestly, it's been so long since I've worked there. I don't know if I would ever work there again, because I don't know if I doubt it would get better. I've looked at the reviews. I don't know if you guys ever go back to your jobs and look to see how they're doing, or look at the reviews and stuff, but it looks like it's still the same. So, and I've done better in regards to work, and I want to try new things. Like maybe working in a bakery, things like that. But I hope you enjoyed the stories as much as I have been just telling them and sharing them with you. But I would love to know, my little sparkles, what stories would you like to hear next? I've worked at an office supply store. I've done professional counseling. I've done daycares. I would love to share a lot of these stories with you. Feel free to let me know in the comments down below, and I'll see you, sparkles, next time. Bye bye.